One of the better games of this Week 15 will take place in Atlanta, where the defending Super Bowl champion New York Giants will come to town to take on the Falcons. Atlanta is currently installed as a 1-point favorite here on BETDAQ. 51 is the total. This is the first time these two teams have met since last year's playoffs, when the Giants, on the way to their Super Bowl championship, blew out the Falcons 24-2. No doubt that is still fresh in the minds of Falcons players. And Atlanta, hey, they're 11-2 this season, tied with Houston for the best record in the NFL. They did lose last week, a disappointing road loss to their division rival Carolina Panthers. Carolina, of course, was 3-9 coming into that game, and they dominated, controlled the game throughout. So Falcons will be looking to bounce back here. Still a big game for them, even though they have the NFC South locked up. They need home field advantage. I mean, Atlanta maybe more than any other team. They're a dome team. They play much better at home than they do on the road. And the Super Bowl this year, remember, is in a dome. So if the Falcons are able to lock up home field advantage, and they're a game and a half right now ahead of their closest competitor, that'll be huge for them. They can play in the Georgia Dome all the way through the NFC playoffs and then go to the Superdome in New Orleans to play the Super Bowl. It's a huge game for the Giants as well. The Giants had full control of the NFC East a month ago, but they've struggled a little bit the past month. They did just beat New Orleans last week, but Giants have now fallen to 8-5, only a game ahead of both Washington and Dallas. So big game for both teams. As you said, Atlanta only a 1-point favorite here, so some lack of faith here in the home team, the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, they have the best record in the league, as we mentioned, tied with Houston. They are at home, so you'd expect this line, at least I expected this line to be closer to Atlanta -3 or Atlanta -3.5. But really, throughout the season, the Falcons have not gotten that much respect from odds makers and the betting public. And last week, obviously, it was justified. They were only 3.5-point road favorites against 3-9 Carolina. Turns out they were blown out in that game. So we'll see if this game works out the same way. I have my doubts. I think Atlanta is going to come out and play well here. They match up well with the Giants. What Atlanta does best is throw the football. Really, this is Dirk Cutter's first year as offensive coordinator, of course, replacing Mike Mularkey. And one of the changes is Atlanta has passed the ball more. Not that they didn't pass the ball much the last couple of years, but there was a lot of balance on this offense. You know, Michael Turner was getting a lot of run in this offense. It hadn't been the case this year. Turner's role has been limited. It's turned into a pass-first offense, and obviously it's worked really well. As we said, 11-2. They're 5th in the NFL in points per game. 8th in the NFL in points per game scored, 5th in points per game allowed. So Falcons very balanced. 4th in pass yards per game. Atlanta passing for 290 yards per game. Matt Ryan has had an excellent season. And the Giants' primary weakness is in the secondary, 27th in the NFL in pass defense. Now, New York is not that much better against the run. 22nd against the run, 25th overall. So it's just been a mediocre New York Giants defense all around this year. But we saw last year when they struggled throughout the first 14, 15 weeks of the season. Right about this time, the Giants defense really turned it on. And throughout the playoffs, they looked like, anyway, an elite unit. As we said, they held Atlanta to 2 points. Atlanta's only points in that playoff game last year came on a safety. So the Giants have had some success against this Atlanta offense recently. We'll see if they'll be able to carry that over. As I said, I have my doubts. I think the Falcons will have some success through the air in this game, and I do look for the Falcons to put up some points. 51 here is sort of a big total, especially when you see that all the trends here point towards the under. The under is 8-1 in the Giants' last 8 road games, 4-0 in Atlanta's last 4 home games, and 6-1-1 in the last 8 meetings between these two teams. So if you put any stock in trends and things of that nature, you will be looking at the under here, especially when you see 51, sort of a big number. But, you know, 51 is a big number for a reason. Like I said, Atlanta passes the ball extremely well. The Giants struggle to stop the pass. And the Giants offense, I mean, we know about the New York Giants offense, 3rd in the NFL this year in points scored. Eli Manning, Hakeem Nicks, Victor Cruz, that wide receiving core, and Eli, of course, developed into an elite quarterback. That's about as good as it gets in the NFL. And even though the Falcons, as we mentioned, 5th in points allowed, there's some injury issues in the secondary for Atlanta. Starting cornerback Asante Samuel questionable for this game, as is starting safety William Moore. So we'll see. We'll find out, obviously, on Friday or Saturday more about these two guys' status. But, you know, problems in the secondary for Atlanta in terms of injuries, problems for the New York Giants in the secondary in terms of not being able to stop anybody. It could lend itself to a high-scoring game. That's probably why we see a total like 51. But as we mentioned, trends pointing towards the under. Now, I have a feeling the Atlanta Falcons are going to come out with a win here. I know the Giants play well against good teams. I believe they're 11-2 against the spread their last 13 games versus teams with a winning record. But I don't know. You know, for Atlanta, I like this spot for Atlanta motivationally. They just lost last week on the road to Carolina. Atlanta's talked about, several of their players have talked about throughout this season, they felt like they haven't been getting the respect of teams like maybe Houston and the San Francisco 49ers, even though they had a better record than those teams for a lot of this season. And no doubt that after losing on the road to Carolina, a bad team last week, those issues are going to be magnified in terms of lack of respect. And I think the Falcons players probably know that. Also, I'm sure the bitter taste that they have from losing in such a blowout fashion, 24-2 in the playoffs last year to these Giants. I like the spot here for the Falcons, only laying 1 point. Do think their offense is going to have some success. And even though it's tough to bet against this New York Giants offense, especially in a big spot, in a big game, the last year or so, they've always seemed to come up big in big games. I just think Atlanta at home is the right play here. I do think they're going to pick up the win, and I recommend a Falcons bet in this game.